And look, I know that this information is a lot to take in, so it will pay for you to review this webinar presentation until everything does eventually sink in. And it will, I promise you. So let's get ready for the second archetype. The second archetype is the escape artist archetype. The escape artist archetype represents that strong feeling to escape from situations that you find intolerable, where this part of you desires immediate relief, distance, and shelter from pain, where "screw this, I'm out of here" is the escape artist's motto. Okay, so this archetype is all about premeditated escapism, in that when confronted with an intolerable situation, this part of you is thinking about and planning ways to avoid that situation. And when I say intolerable, I mean that you find a situation difficult, discomforting, upsetting, and unbearable. And you are triggered into being the escape artist when you think and feel that a situational aspect of your reality has become so stressful, so threatening, so unpleasant, or so unknowing that you feel you can't cope with it, you can't manage it, you can't make sense of it, you can't make peace with it, you can't stay with it. And so there is a strong urge and this intense feeling within to flee from that situation that you find intolerable. And that situation could be in your local environment, something that's happening in your economy, something that's even happening far away in another country, something that's happening at work, at home, in your relationship, in your business. It is a situation that no matter how close or far away you are from it, that situation is triggering an emotional reaction within you to escape from it. You will also find that the escape artist within you is triggered because you feel entrapped. By the word entrapped, I mean that you find yourself in a circumstance that you feel has restricted and limited you, that has got a stranglehold on your soul, and that perhaps prevents you from being truly free. We become entrapped when the lifestyle is cramped and constricted, where everything has become too routine, too monotonous, too habituated, too familiar, too boring, and too dissatisfying, where you feel the inescapable need to experience something new, exciting, different, and stimulating, where you must get a break from the norm, where you must escape from all of that which is drowning you. Entrapment happens when we have become so habituated and attached to obligations, duties, and activities that have killed the spirit and demoralized the will to live and carry on. You see, all humans do have this inherent curiosity and desire to be adventurous, to explore and to investigate new landscapes and experiences, which sadly, for the majority of people, this desire to be free, wild, spontaneous, and adventurous has been suppressed by the conventional lifestyle of routine habits and materialistic entrapments of society. And that is where the escape artist within you becomes a detrimental trait, whereby you find escapism and relief in quick and easy, but unhealthy and toxic habits. So let's explore the 4 different types of escapism, starting with escaping from responsibility. So what does it actually mean to escape from responsibility? Well, let's open up this line of inquiry by first defining the word responsibility. Responsibility requires one to take a position of action and accountability. It means to be response-able, able to respond to people, situations, and tasks that requires our presence, contribution, and assistance. Now, when being responsible for others, this often means that we need to put our own personal needs and selfish desires to one side so that we can selflessly take care of other people's needs and desires. However, the modern day human can be a very self-involved, self-interested and self-orientated person that is entirely focused on the I, focused on what I must do, what I must get, what I think is right, where this self-centeredness leaves very little time, interest and focus in being responsible for the needs and desires of others. And taking a position of responsibility is tough business. We must make important and life-changing decisions. We have to commit to doing some hard work to achieve a certain result. We have to step into the unknown and do something completely different. We must be held accountable by others. We must expose ourselves to judgment and scrutiny. And these situations can be frightful. When thinking about a position of responsibility, we might imagine a future scenario where there is some type of discomfort, loss, pain or failure, which then elicits doubt, hesitation and indecisiveness. And thus, we escape from having to take that position of responsibility because, let's face it, being responsible often means that we have to make sacrifices. When being responsible towards something or someone, sometimes we have to give up some things that we value. We may have to sacrifice a possession. We may have to sacrifice a current position. You may need to sacrifice a financial position, a locational position, a relational position that you currently enjoy and value and feel that you can't live without. You may have to sacrifice a personality trait. That's because when taking on a new position of responsibility, this often means that we must develop new knowledge and skills and at the same time sacrifice a part of who we are. Now, what do I mean by sacrifice a part of who we are? I mean that when taking on a new position of responsibility, there is an aspect of our character, perspective, beliefs or behavior that is immature, inappropriate, unnecessary or unsuited for the challenge. Also, when taking on new responsibilities, we may have to sacrifice our freedom and privacy. So, for example, the escape artist archetype arises within us whenever we are feeling hesitant towards making a relational commitment, because that commitment spells the end of a freedom and our privacy. And not wanting to give up our freedom and privacy can apply to either a business, platonic or romantic commitment. Because relational commitments are scary. Because having a relationship means to be held accountable to someone else, in that we are pledging some sort of allegiance, promise, desire or specific outcome to this person or organization. And of course, that pledge that we make to the other is reliant upon our performance, reliant upon us upholding our side of the bargain, whereby we must commit to that organization or person until the obligation has ended or until death or separation do we part. And that bond and dependency that requires us to uphold a certain term, agreement and pledge is something that can appear to be restricting and limiting and something that we want to avoid. And it's those fears and insecurities that we have surrounding relational commitments and not wanting to sacrifice our freedom and privacy that makes us non-committal. And so the escape artist trait will be thinking of all the ways, the excuses and the reasons of why you should avoid making new relationships, why you should avoid intimacy, or how you should avoid revealing certain aspects of who you are, of your background, to the person that you desire to cultivate a relationship with. And so to summarize that segment about escaping from new responsibilities, the reason that we hesitate, that we hold back, that we avoid, and that we shy away from new responsibilities is because it means that we must sacrifice an aspect of our life that we value. That thing that we value is something that brings comfort, familiarity, security, pleasure, a sense of reward and achievement. And so even just to imagine being without that thing that we value is enough to elicit some type of mental and emotional pain, a perceived sense of loss. And when the imagined pains of losing what you have now are far greater than the imagined pleasures of gaining something new when taking on a new responsibility, you will always rationalize a plausible reason and excuse to not take new action. You will always find a way to stay as you are. You will always avoid the change, even though the change of a new responsibility is the key to experiencing personal growth and making positive progress. Also, taking on responsibility means being held accountable for our actions, accountable in that whenever we take on the responsibility of a project, a task, an activity, job, or relationship even, our actions are being taken into account by others. In other words, what we do and what we achieve is being monitored, evaluated, and judged on its merits by other people. Others are looking to see if our performance is good or bad, right or wrong, ineffective or effective. Which is to say that others are looking to get the measure of our competency to see if we've got what it takes to manage and fulfill the position of responsibility, whereby the others will appraise what we do, intervene with advice, and make suggestions so that we can adjust and improve, or worst case scenario, they will criticize and condemn how we perform that role of responsibility that we've taken on. And nobody likes to be criticized and condemned. We would rather avoid a situation where that might happen. You see, the escape artist is a behavioral trait that will often shy away from new responsibilities without giving them a consideration or try because the fears and insecurities they get in the way, where there can be this instant refusal to engage with something new and this take flight response. And so when confronted with that which invokes discomfort within you, the underlying insecurity of not knowing enough to get the job done properly and safely, the fear of making a mistake or experiencing a loss, and the perceived discomfort of doing something difficult, the aversion towards pain, these factors will trigger the escape artist's need to take flight from the situation, whereby you will start to think of all of the excuses and reasons why you should not follow through with something new, why it is better for you to stay as you are, which really is you planning your exit strategy. You are convincing yourself to opt out of the experience, where the inclination is to turn and run the other way. And when you can't overcome the escape artist's take flight reaction, when this urge to flee situations that are uncomfortable is overriding your decision making process, then you are less response able. You are less able to respond to a situation in a manner that could be constructive and progressive. And so the moral of the aforementioned is that only by overcoming our fears and insecurities as we step into positions of responsibility that requires high standards of conduct do we grow in courage and competency and get the results that we desire. However, each time that we shirk the responsibility of taking on a new experience, task, or role, we negate the opportunity for personal growth and progress. And I will even go as far as saying that escaping from responsibility is a childish thing to do, in the sense that if you don't take on responsibility in your life, then the less personal growth you will experience and the more immature, undeveloped, and incompetent that you will remain. Furthermore, we're not being held accountable for your actions with no one to account for your movements. You are more likely to stray off the path and do that which is inappropriate, unacceptable, and damaging. The standards of your behaviour are likely to drop. That's because when nobody's looking, and if you think you can get away with it, you are more likely to take the quicker and easier routes in life, take the shortcuts, which usually means half-arsing it, doing it partial and improperly, which will always lead to mistakes on your part and wrongdoing towards others that were hoping, expecting, or reliant upon you to do a thing properly. And so, now that we've explored all of the different ways in which escaping from responsibility is having a detrimental impact on our life, let's balance out this topic by looking at where the escape artist trait would have a beneficial impact when it comes to escaping from responsibility. So, when is it beneficial to escape from responsibility? Well, often we are faced with a situation of having to be responsible for irresponsible people. This could be a situation at home, at work, or with friends. And these situations are when we are having to take care of other people's needs who refuse to be accountable for their own needs, even though they could and they should take care of their own needs for their own good. So, for example, you could have a family member, a child, a teenager, or a sibling that is refusing to pull their weight, refusing to take care of their health, refusing to do certain tasks, refusing to address their own problems, refusing to be responsible when needed or when the time calls for it. And so you find yourself picking up the slack and doing the extra work, which of course aggravates you and results in some type of conflict with the unwilling party, and then you bearing a grudge, which is an unpleasant experience for all concerned. Which brings us to the crux of this particular topic, in that being responsible for irresponsible people does not help them. It keeps them in that mindset of irresponsibility. When we continue to support irresponsible people is in that we sympathise with them and do too much for them. They remain in their comfort zone and they never learn to fly on their own. They never step out of that comfort zone to expand and grow. They will never learn how to climb out of a rut to move forward and upwards. They will never experience the personal growth they need to strengthen their character and physicality. They will remain in a karmic cycle of degenerative behaviours. And where else do we need to moderate our responsibilities? Well, sometimes we do fall victim to the demands and expectations that we set for ourselves and that are projected onto us by others. And what exactly do I mean by that? Well, when we have these demands and expectations of certain outcomes and results to take place in our life, we can take on too much responsibility, in that we take on a schedule, a project, a task, a commitment, or a relationship even that is too much for us to handle and cope with. In that this position of responsibility means that we have ended up in a place of experiencing extreme amounts of effort, stress, and anxiety. And thus, when we have overcommitted to something that we are underprepared for, then what usually follows is the mental and emotional distress of being frustrated, anxious, upset, and finally, a resentment towards the object of our commitments. So, at the beginning of any new idea or venture, we need to be honest with what we can and cannot be responsible for. We sometimes need to take time out so that we can mull things over, so that we can accurately assess what is the right amount of responsibility that we can handle at one time. To ask, what knowledge and skills do I need? What adjustments do I need to make so that I can take on this position of responsibility, whereby you know with absolute confidence that you have the competency to maintain its role and duties. Now let's delve into the second type of escapism, which is escaping the truths about reality. The escape artist is a characteristic trait that is often triggered when you want to avoid dealing with a truth about some aspect of your reality, whereby the inclination, be it conscious or unconscious, is to avoid a certain person, avoid a certain situation, avoid a piece of information that could reveal something that you really don't want to know. So why do we feel the need to escape from the truths of reality? Because it is often the truths about reality that people find distressing. We can feel distressed about certain aspects of who we are, about what we do, how we live, about certain people and the world around us. We don't like to know about things that are unworthy, wrong, faulty, ugly, inferior, deceptive, defective, incompetent, and evil, because they reveal an uncomfortable truth that we'd rather not know. We would rather they weren't there, weren't true, and so rather than be exposed to them or be reminded of them, we do our very best to repress those ghastly truths from our mind. We filter those ghastly truths out from our awareness. We turn a blind eye to the things that we don't want to see and acknowledge. And why? Why do we close the mind to versions of reality that are different to our own? Why can't we handle and accept the truth? Why can't we admit that we might be wrong? That's because to accept a version of reality that proves that we are wrong would dismantle some of our belief systems and affect the integrity of our identity. And since what we believe in and what we identify with is a major part of our guiding values and principles, for that to be proved wrong would leave us in a state of unknowing, uncertainty, and unsureness. And those three different states that I've just mentioned, those are states of disorder, states of chaos. And us humans, we like things to be in order. We like to know that what we know is right, consistent, and reliable. For knowingness provides us with the security of structure, order, and certainty in our lives. And so any truth that threatens the security of what we know and how we live is a truth that we tend to avoid, that we choose to ignore, that we choose to avert from. Therefore, we get to escape from dealing with the painstaking truth that threatens our way of life. However, as long as we keep escaping from the uncomfortable truths about our character, our lifestyle, our behavioural patterns, our habits, our relationships, our actions, our past, job, environment, or the society, the world that we live in, then we also continue to live the lie. We live the deception. We live with the ignorance. We relive the mistakes of getting it wrong because of our ignorance. And listen, there is a flip side to this. Sometimes to escape the truth about reality is beneficial. Sometimes the truth is just too unbearable to know and live with. Sometimes we just can't handle the truth, and that's because the truth can inflict some kind of upset, conflict, loss, or trauma. To discover the truth could mean the end of something, the end of a relationship, the end of a career, the end of a venture, the end of a pleasurable experience, the end of financial security, the end of love. And sometimes in life there are moments that we need to put the truth to one side until we find the appropriate time, strength, courage, and a strategy to process and live with that truth. Because when a truth has proven something to be wrong, this revelation is typically followed by a period of unsettling change whereby we experience anger, upset, frustration, disappointment, regret, shame, guilt, or grief. whereby we have to face a disruption, an adjustment, and sometimes an entirely new way of living and being. If, however, we do not face the hard truths about reality, then often we end up avoiding an important issue about the self or the other, and then this issue is left unresolved. And yet those unresolved issues, they never go away, but instead they remain as a karma that continues to present itself in similar future situations that provoke and incite the negative memories, thoughts, and emotions surrounding that unresolved issue. The unresolved issue becomes a malignant blight on the psyche that, until we face it, resolve it, and learn the lesson, this part of our life will always be a thorn in the side, a limitation, a roadblock, a wrong action that leads to a negative consequence. Which now brings us to the third type of escapism, which is escaping routine and work. We all at some point get this urge to escape from the parts of our life, the circumstances that have become too routine and too hard work. Because let's be honest here, the repetitions of routine and work, the going over the same thing day in and day out, well, it can at times feel restrictive, demoralizing, and like it's never going to end. Furthermore, human beings are not designed to work for long and arduous hours. We are not designed to be forced into a set pattern of behaviors and clam-baked into a style of living that is heavily set in a regimentation of schedule and work. This violates the nature of balance. However, most people are so work-orientated and routine compounded that they are busy rushing to their deaths. They rarely get to stop and smell the roses. There is minimal allowance for adventure, flexibility, freedom, curiosity, and novelty, which are very important needs and aspects of the human condition. So if your life has become too regimented, too scheduled, too robotic, too mundane, and too restrictive, if you have committed to a daily, monthly, or yearly routine of tasks and projects, duties and activities that makes minimal allowance for you to take a break to enjoy the fun, laughter, and beauty of life, if you feel like you are pounding away every day on this uphill treadmill, if you are grinding out the mileage in the same one direction and feel like you are looking at the same dreary scenery each day, then your life has become too routine and too work orientated. You see, all work and no play makes for a very dull and uninteresting life. The experience of your life can start to feel like this relentless chore that never seems to end, where the imbalanced lifestyle of extreme work ethic and regimented routines will assault you mentally, emotionally, physically, and spiritually, numbing you into a state of psychological sterilization where you become this joyless, indifferent, dispassionate, cold, thick-skinned, and cynical being that has had all of the excitement, curiosity, and fun sucked out of them. And that's when we can start to loathe the life that we live and the person that we become. And as within, so without, we can start to sneer at, loathe, and resent those around us who seem to be living a better and easier life. Because of course, when you are slaving away each day, wearing that shackle and foot chain as you shuffle along the line, to see others living a more relaxed and carefree life will make you envious or take scorn even. We also need to explore the health consequences of overstretching yourself with too much routine and work. And for that, let's consider the properties of an elastic band, which makes for a great analogy. And so if I take an elastic band and keep stretching it and stretching it in one direction and do this for too long and for too far, then eventually that applied force will violate the natural state of that elastic band. the applied force will create such a tension of energy that eventually the overstretched elastic band will reach a critical point of tension and then snap back. Now, most people in life are overstretching their psychological and physical elastic band too far and for too long, and yet they are getting away with it. They are overstretching their limits without noticing or recognizing the tension nor the irreversible damage of overstretching. And why? Because they are using quick fix escapisms. They are soothing and suppressing that tension with pleasurable and alleviating substances and activities. Using or abusing junk food, alcohol, drugs, shopping and entertainment as a means to get some rewarding escapism from the stress and torture of a relentless routine and work obligation. And it's when you fall into the trap of rewarding yourself with pleasurable compensation to alleviate the entrapment of work and routine that you continue with overstretching your mind, body and soul. And it's when we continue forth relentlessly and not listening to those warning signs of persistent stress, fatigue and illnesses where the body is saying no, that's when we are violating the natural ecosystem, and that would surely result in some type of prolonged suffering and dis-ease within the mind and body. And of course, those pleasurable escapisms that we use and abuse to soothe the way that we feel, they are band-aid solutions that offer temporary relief. However, if you maintain a lifestyle of extreme routine and work, your elastic band will keep stretching until inevitably it snaps back to leave you with permanent damage, harm, loss and injury. It could be a physical illness, it could be extreme fatigue, anxiety disorder and depression. It could be the inability to maintain a relationship, that you lose a job, lose an investment. It could be where your entire life collapses back into a state of sudden shock, chaos and disorder. So what I am saying is this: don't overstretch yourself, don't overcommit too much with work, don't completely routine your life, otherwise you will suffer the consequences. And I realize that work and routine for many has become so necessary and vital just in order for them to barely sustain the status quo of their lifestyle, whereby to make any lifestyle adjustments could be a major disruption that could make things worse, and that they can't pay the bills or can't even afford the basic needs. Here is where most people will have to reprioritize their values. Because think about it, what's more important to you? To maintain a lifestyle that's slowly killing you, or to cultivate a lifestyle that makes this life an enjoyable and varied experience that is lived with good health, good vibes and good times? Because as the saying goes, if you don't take care of your health today, you will be forced to deal with your illness later. And that's because violating human nature tends to result in illness. Therefore, the most optimal life experience is one that takes into account health and vitality, whereby your work and routine is balanced with rest and variety, in which case you would offset the amount of work and routine in your life with the same amount of time to enjoy moments and periods of relaxation and recuperation, where you enjoy an adventurous life that incorporates variety, spontaneity and fun. And this leads us both on escaping dangers and fears, because there's no getting away from it. We all have this inextricable need to escape from that which is dangerous and fearful. It's a natural take-flight instinctive reaction that is part of the human biology, where both danger and fear are two peas in a pod. Whenever we sense that something is dangerous, this also elicits a sense of fear. We fear that there will be some type of harm, injury or loss when imagining or thinking about something that we feel could result in some type of damage. The escape artist archetype, therefore, is an essential human trait that has a keen awareness of potential dangers that could result in some type of negative consequence. And the escape artist will be that feeling of being flighty whenever something we are fearful of is pertinent and creeping. And here is where we need to make a clear distinction between environmental and situational dangers and fears. Let's begin with environmental dangers and fears. With environmental dangers and fears, we do need to be wary of and keep a safe distance from the obstacles, the elements, the moving structures, and the hazards that are present within the landscape or the cityscape, and where there is a risk of physical injury. And so it's shrewd to have your wits about you, and it's best to avoid to give a wide berth to those potential risks. With situational dangers and fears, I refer to the necessity of avoiding the potential harms that could result from interactions that you have with people. That's because we can sometimes get caught up in the minor and major disagreements, whereby if for whatever reason we are feeling a bit narky, defensive and reactive, those disagreements can blow up into quarrels or full-blown arguments with other people. Now, it must be said that the dangers and fears in relation to situational confrontations and disputes are a two-way street. It takes two to tango, in that if we cannot remain calm and composed and collective when interacting with people, if we are unable to manage our emotions and unable to recognize the limitations of our own subjective bias, then of course we can be defensive, evasive, ignorant, reactive, and jumpy when it comes to dealing with people. And of course it goes without saying that these situational interactions that turn sour and get heated, they can apply to a situational spat with a lover, family member, or a close friend. And because there is such a strong emotional tie with the people that we have known for some time, during those moments of heated exchange, it can be difficult to temper down the way we feel. But as they say, sometimes you just got to be the bigger person and just walk away. So, whenever you find yourself in an intense situational dispute, or you have a precognition that an interaction with someone could escalate, and this is something that can't be amicably resolved, then it is far wiser for you to back down, back off, and back away, and embrace the escape artist's instinctive urge to take flight to a place where you can find distance and space, where you are safe from harm's way, so that you can take time to pause, reflect, and get a fresh perspective and realize a different approach, so that you are ready to deal with the situation with a fresh, rational, and composed response, or so that you can abandon the situation altogether because it is beyond redemption. And now that we've explored why it is essential to escape from environmental and situational dangers and fears, let's look at why it's important that you embrace danger and fear and lean into things that you would normally avoid and escape from. Because there are certain times in life that we need to throw caution to the wind. We need to face our deepest fears and do what appears to be dangerous, because if we don't, then these fears and dangers will dictate what we can and can't do, and they will control the way we behave. It could be that we are unwilling to take risks by venturing into new landscapes, and that fear can cause the perimeters, routines, and habits of our life to be restricted to the local vicinity of our habitat. In other words, we can start to live a shrunken and sheltered life. It is the escape artists' strong and fearful urge to avoid anything that is unknown, unusual, and uncomfortable, that talks you out of taking on new ventures whilst talking you into sticking with what you already know works best, even though by staying as you are and sticking with what you've got will prevent you from venturing into something that would make things work better for your overall well-being. Now let's consider different situational factors where it is necessary for you to embrace the unknown to stimulate personal growth, and discuss what the fears are that would stop and harm you, because without personal growth, we do experience the suffering of personal decline. And so when considering the unknown, when thinking of doing something completely new, it is the escape artist's desire to avoid danger and fear that is triggered. That fear is triggered when we are uncertain of and unsure about a situation, where in the absence of knowledge, wisdom and confidence, we imagine all of the potential worst case scenarios of what might happen, and this fear-based projection is what then elicits a feeling of dread, insecurity, worry and discomfort. And then we start to rationalize why it's probably best that we don't expose ourselves to that situation. For example, that urge and rationalization that we have to avoid a situation can arise when we are thinking of upgrading a career position, when taking on a new job, when approaching a stranger, when starting a new project, or even when learning a new skill or hobby, whereby the trepidation that we have towards the unknown causes us to ruminate over all of the things that could possibly go wrong. And there's nothing wrong with considering the downside of anything. It is necessary to prepare ourselves, but we can start to overthink and second guess situations. We can imagine and think about all of the things that could possibly go wrong more than we do imagine and think about what could possibly go right. And when dreading the worst case scenario, we are likely to refrain, to pull back, to choke and to not follow through, where the overriding fear of what might happen causes us to shrink back and retract from the situation. And when we investigate that overriding fear, we will uncover a whole host of fears that give us the jeepers creepers. This would be the fear of making a mistake, the fear of being exposed as unworthy, the fear of judgment, the fear of ridicule, the fear of rejection, the fear of loss, the fear of harm, and the fear of failure. And it is these fears that incite either a flight or fight reaction. And of course, it is much safer and comfortable to take flight from a situation than it is to take fight to the situation and expose oneself to those discomforting fears. And so the escape artist's urge to take flight will always be the reason why we remain as we are, why we miss the opportunity, why we don't go for it, why we don't experience new situational factors that could elicit personal growth. So where else does the escape artist need to flee situations cause us more harm than good? Well, wherever you have ongoing disputes and conflicts in your relationships, you will find that the escape artist within you is avoiding the underlying issues and causes of those reoccurring situations. In that, both consciously and unconsciously, you are always finding a way to divert, delay, ignore and deny dealing with the situation and dealing with it in a manner that gets to the crux of the issue and addresses the actual cause. And so those ongoing disputes and conflicts within our relationships, they remain as unresolved karma. We keep re-experiencing the same situation, the same cycle, the same action and reaction in the future until such time as we properly address and resolve the situation. Leaving our relational disputes and conflicts unresolved means that this part of our life will always remain pending, like we are stuck with an amber traffic light that is continually flashing on and off, where this part of our life becomes a conscious blight, this irritating tick on the conscience that won't bloody go away. And that which remains unresolved is then left as this undeveloped, unhealed and tainted part of our life. We carry its baggage and we suffer the weight of its anxiety, which beckons us to ask, why do we continually escape from relational issues when the pain of not resolving those issues can be torturous and unbearable? We avoid dealing with the important, urgent and sensitive issues of relationships for various reasons. It could be that we simply don't have the communication skills, don't have the words, don't have the confidence in which to properly and thoroughly articulate the way that we think and feel. It could be that we just don't want to get ourselves into another unpleasant and draining argument with this person. It could be that we don't want to be exposed for something bad and wrong that we've done. It could be that we are righteous and stubborn and therefore won't concede our position nor try for reconciliation. It could be that we don't want to face the truth of the matter because it's something we don't want to hear and know. It could be that we are playing mind games and waiting to see who will fold first. It could be that to resolve the ongoing issue and conflict of that relationship could spell the end of the relationship itself. And so with all of those "it could be this" reasons, we avoid dealing with the relational issue and we fester in the resentment that we have towards the other person. In absence of expression and resolution in this part of our life, we live within a quiet desperation and despair as we limbo in a state of unknowingness and uncertainty, as we fluctuate between states of anger, frustration, disappointment and sadness, as we drown in a sense of guilt, shame, abandonment and disloyalty towards oneself and the other. So let me now give you a brief summary on the detriments of the escape artist's traits. We start with living an imbalanced and stressful life of too much work and routine. I think that in today's modern world, as individuals and a collective, we have become over-committed to extreme schedules. We've morphed into these human doings that are so busy producing and consuming and overloaded with the immense stresses of daily life that violates the very beingness of our human nature. And unless you have factored into your lifestyle that much needed balance, in that with equal measure your life incorporates activities and moments of adventure, fun, relaxation and recuperation, then without these countermeasures to balance your work and routine, you will always feel stressed out and entrapped within a life that is extreme, unrelenting and unforgiving. Next, avoiding responsibility, unknowns, truths and fears equals personal decline. Now, one of the main reasons that we get entrapped into a rigid and habitual lifestyle is because we fear to live a more expansive and different life. We fear to live more, and in some cases, we actually fear to live. Often it is the fears and dangers of the great unknown that the escape artist within us wants to avoid. We avoid trying new and different experiences in life because we are being held back by the fears of the unknown. It is the fear of not knowing what's coming next, not knowing if it will be safe, not knowing what to do, not knowing if we got what it takes, and ultimately not knowing if we will survive a new experience safely and without harm or loss. That uncertainty and unknowingness is what strikes fear into the heart and soul. And those fears can stop us dead in our tracks. However, it is only when we face our fears and venture into the great unknown that the dance of life takes place. We only come alive and grow in the places that we don't know. We only experience personal growth and gains when doing something new and different. We can only develop skills, knowledge, intelligence, and wisdom by doing new things. You see, when you venture into the great unknown to face your fears, that's when a different part of you is forced to deal with the situation, forced to make it work, forced to push through and succeed. When we are put into the uncomfortable places, the difficult situations, when our safety is on the line, when we have no other choice but to succeed or fail, when it's life or death, that is when the motivation, the need, the desire, the enthusiasm, and the willpower is at its most vigorous. The will to live, the will to have, the will to make it happen is the driving force that comes to our rescue. So, whatever it is that you perceive as being difficult and discomforting, wherever the fear and insecurity is palpable and overpowering, wherever there is a responsibility that you dread, these will be the aspects of your life that you will be avoiding and escaping from. However, it is often the things that we continually escape from and avoid the most that are the things that we need to face the most. That if you were to face and resolve these particular aspects of your life, you would actually experience some type of personal growth and achievement. You would actually satisfy some type of need and desire. You would sharpen your skill sets, develop your competencies, and strengthen your character. And it is very simple. The more of life that we embrace, the more we grow. The more of life that we avoid, the less we grow. Furthermore, those problems and pains of life that we continually escape from, they become long withstanding issues that remain unresolved and they never disappear. Those same experiences that we escape from, they keep showing up in our life as the unresolved fears and insecurities. So, where else does escapism dictate the quality of your life? It is when you are indulging with unhealthy escapisms with quick fix toxic habits. We can fall into quick fix and convenient habits of pleasurable escapism and relief in which to counteract those negative states of stress, misery, and fatigue. Those negative states, aforementioned negative states, are resultant of being entrapped within a lifestyle of extreme work ethics and routine, which also means that the escape artist archetype will be a reflexive and reactive trait that uses and abuses quick and easy methods of escapism so that you can temporarily alleviate and soothe the stress and pains of being entrapped within an extreme lifestyle that violates your true nature, where any substance or activity that provides you with immediate and quick alleviation from negative thoughts and feelings will become a reinforced habit that allows you to continue with an extreme lifestyle that violates your true nature, where the prolonged abuse or addiction to pleasurable escapisms also comes with the high risk of physical and psychological damage. So wherever you have become addicted to and dependent on quick fix methods of pleasurable escapism and relief, these will correlate with an aspect of your life that is imbalanced, extreme, stressful, and perhaps where you are not mentally and emotionally coping with, where you need to make a major adjustment to this part of your life. And here, whilst on this subject of quick fix relief, we need to talk about digital distraction. Most people have unknowingly factored unhealthy escapisms into their life with the entertaining distractions of a digital reality. With the advent and widespread acceptance of digital technology, most people are able to quickly and easily escape from the unappealing, boring and stressful aspects of their life by playing video games, scrolling down social media feeds, or taking on a Netflix series of dramas and documentaries. And nowadays, with access to all of our entertainment preferences on a handheld digital phone, we can enjoy mini escapisms. We can get a 5 or 10 minute break from life here and there and whenever we like. Of course, when used in moderation, it is harmless to enjoy digital stimulus as a form of entertaining escapism. However, digital stimulus can become a compulsive form of escapism. We can easily fall into the trap of abusing digital stimulus to escape from the different aspects of life, whereby addiction to digital stimulus becomes another form of entrapment, and that we've become habituated, fixated upon and addicted to the device that provides us with mental stimulation and escapism. We can become mind slaves to a virtual reality, and those who are most susceptible are the gamers, researchers, inventors, administrators, content providers, and anyone else that relies upon a digital device as a means to work, live, and express themselves, which, when you think about it, is essentially everyone. So getting sucked into the vortex of a digital reality, regardless of whether it is a method of entertaining escapism or for creative and work-related productivity, if you spend most of your time glued to a digital screen, you will neglect the other and equally as important areas of your life that are necessary for balance, welfare and happiness. And so we finish off the detriments of the escape artist archetype with being stuck in an entrapment and escapism cycle. You see, we do need regular escapism from the regular aspects of our life that are stressful and habitual. We do need escapism from all forms of lifestyle and psychological entrapments. Entrapment means to be caught within something that is restricting and limiting to the quality of your life. And when we are caught within this intense focus and energy draining commitment to certain activities and duties, there can be this foreboding sense of endurance of I have to do this, or when it's over then I can rest, that we all experience. When we are trying, struggling, pushing and forcing ourselves to get through something that's unpleasant and painstaking. It may be that we have committed to this limited belief that we can't stop what we are doing, that we must continue with the intensity, the progress and the pace of something, because if we don't, then we could lose something, or we might not get the outcome that we need on time. It could be that unless we stick with the extreme pace of a certain commitment that we've made over here, that we won't be able to experience or maintain something else over there, where a happiness, a security, a dream, an obligation or a promise over there is completely dependent on the extreme things that we are doing over here. We can become so deeply fixated on things because there is such an investment and reliance upon these things to provide a certain outcome that we have convinced ourselves that we can't live without. And so with entrapment, we can get locked into a double bind where the pains of extreme work and routine are being rewarded with the pleasure and expectancy of some financial or lifestyle gain. We remain entrapped to the extreme cycle of work and routine, doing something that is knowingly or unknowingly bad for us health-wise. We can't give it up. We can't let it go. We can't conceive of a life without the commitment that we've made, and we can't imagine not reaping the rewards from our investments. And furthermore, we fear that we will perhaps incur some type of painful loss should we make a lifestyle change. So if your lifestyle has become one that has trapped you within the cycle of work and routine that needs quick fix escapisms in which to alleviate stress and misery, then clearly you are living an imbalanced lifestyle. Clearly you are not nurturing the other aspects of your life that are instrumental and vital for your overall welfare. And a life that makes minimal allowance for self-preservation and self-care is a life of self-harm and self-destruction. If you are living with extremity in your life, then you need to incorporate more ease, flow, and rhythm into your life. You may need to reflect upon your current circumstances to identify with and establish where you have fallen into a lifestyle routine of stressful entrapment and where you are using quick fix escapisms as a means to countervail your stress and misery. Then when you factor healthy strategies into your life where you get relaxation, recuperation, and rejuvenation for the mind, body, and soul, then you will balance the parts of your lifestyle that are too extreme, stressful, overwhelming, unrewarding, or mundane. This is when healthy escapism has a positive effect, where your balanced life is one that is structured with flexibility, where you have the structure of work and routine that maintains the status quo, and you have the flexibility to try new things, to go off the beaten path, to chase a few rainbows, to occasionally throw it all up in the air and say, screw this, I'm doing this thing over here instead. And now that we have both explored the escape artist archetype, I want you to contemplate where these traits are prominent in your life. Where is the escape artist trait a problem for you? Where does the escape artist restrict your personal growth? What are you continually running from that you need to face and address? Where have you become addicted to unhealthy habits as a means of escapism? Think it over. Which now brings us to the next